All right, let's talk about virtual reality in the classroom. We hear it all the time, right? It's the future of learning. But what if I told you some surprising data suggests the exact opposite might be true? Let's dive in.
Okay, get this. Picture a study with two groups of firefighter trainees. One group learns with virtual reality. The other, they just get textbooks. Afterwards, they're both tested on what they learned. And the textbook group actually scored higher on factual recall. Yeah, that's probably not something the VR industry wants you to hear. But here's the thing. Understanding why that happened is the key. It tells us everything we need to know about where VR in education is a total game changer and where it, well, just doesn't work.
But then, just when you think you've got it figured out, you see numbers like these, and the whole picture gets way more complicated. I mean, this data is from major industry studies, and it is just staggering. Learners in VR, they're 4 times more focused. They report a, get this, 275% increase in confidence in what they've learned. And look at that last one, the bottom line. After a year, knowledge retention can be up to 80% with VR, compared to just 20% with old-school methods. So what is going on here?
Right? So what is going on? How can this one piece of tech be less effective than a plain old textbook for learning facts, but at the same time be so dramatically, overwhelmingly more effective in all these other ways? That's the puzzle we're going to solve together. Okay, so first things first, let's go back to that firefighter study. What really happened there?
So here's the main takeaway from that study. When it came to what scientists call declarative knowledge, the stuff you can declare, like facts, figures, theories, the group that learned from the textbook simply did better on the test. They just remembered more of it, plain and simple.
But, and this is a huge but, here's the twist. The VR group, they reported way higher scores for things like motivation and engagement. They felt more into it. They actually enjoyed the learning process more. And that's a really critical piece of this puzzle, even if they didn't remember as many facts.
And you know what? This wasn't just some random fluke. There's a really well-established scientific reason for this whole thing, and it all comes down to how our brains are wired.
It's a concept called cognitive load theory. Now, the easiest way to think about it is like this. Your brain's working memory is kind of like the RAM in your computer. You've only got so much of it. If you try to run too many heavy programs at once, everything just slows down. Well, learning is exactly the same.
And this slide just nails the difference. See, when you're reading a textbook, what we call the extraneous load, that's all the mental energy you spend on stuff that isn't the actual information, is super low. So your brain can just dedicate all its power to absorbing the facts. But in VR, especially if you're new to it, your brain is going into overdrive processing all this extra stuff. The novelty of the headset, the crazy immersive visuals, figuring out the controls. That creates a high extraneous load, and it can literally leave less mental bandwidth available to actually memorize the important stuff.
Okay, so if VR isn't the best tool for just memorizing a bunch of facts, then where does it win? Well, this is where the story gets really, really cool.
Yeah, the research is super clear on this. VR absolutely crushes it in 3 key areas. First, procedural and motor skills, learning how to do things. Second, spatial learning, understanding complex 3D environments. And third, empathy, literally letting you walk a mile in someone else's shoes. See the pattern? These aren't about facts, they're about building experience.
Let's go back to the fire safety example. Study after study shows that when you stop testing for facts and start testing for action, like how to properly use a fire extinguisher or which way to go in an escape route, the groups trained in VR are way faster and they make way fewer critical mistakes. They've actually built the muscle memory. And here's the science behind why that works. Research from top places like Stanford's Virtual Human Interaction Lab shows that VR creates what's called experiential learning. Your brain literally processes the simulation like it's a real event, and that leads to way better decision-making and real changes in behavior later on, in a way that just, reading about something in a book never could. So a really clear pattern starts to emerge, right? If you need to learn how to do something, navigate a space, or understand someone's perspective, VR is an unbelievable tool. But if your only goal is to memorize a list of facts or a complex theory, well, that textbook might still be your best friend.
And this isn't just some theory locked away in a lab anymore. This exact understanding is shaping how VR is being rolled out in real schools and universities as we speak.
One of the biggest game changers here has been the Meta for Education program. What they're doing is providing schools with managed Quest 3 headsets at a discount, and that managed part is key. It makes it so much easier for a teacher to just deploy a specific lesson to an entire class without all the usual tech headaches.
And just look at what they're being used for. It aligns perfectly with what we've been talking about, with VR's strengths. We're talking virtual chemistry labs where you can mix chemicals without blowing anything up, immersive field trips to ancient Rome, med students doing virtual dissections to really understand that complex 3D anatomy. These are all experiences, things that would be totally impossible or way too expensive for a normal classroom.
And this really sums up the mindset of the educators who are actually using this stuff. I love this quote from Dr. Sean Howes at San Diego State. He says, "We're not replacing things. We're empowering students to do things that would be out of reach otherwise." It's not about replacement, it's about enhancement.
So, let's put it all together. With everything we've learned, we can actually create a simple little rulebook for how to use VR smartly in education. It really all comes down to picking the right tool for the right job.
Okay, so here's the playbook. Step 1, define your goal. Are you trying to teach a fact, or are you trying to create an experience? That changes everything. If it's facts, you actually want to reduce the novelty and distraction in the VR world to lower that cognitive load. But if you're teaching a skill, you want to crank up the immersion and give people lots of chances to practice. And here's a big one for all cases: keep an eye on the time. The research is clear. Too long in a headset causes fatigue, and the learning benefits actually start to drop off.
So the big takeaway here is really clear, isn't it? VR is not here to replace the textbook. They're not enemies. Instead, think of it as a powerful, specialized partner. The smartest education programs out there are using VR for the things a textbook could never, ever do. Give students experiences they'll never forget.
Which leaves us with one last question for you to mull over. If your school or your job rolled out VR training tomorrow, after everything we've talked about, would you trust it to teach you the hard facts and theory, or would you see it as a tool that's really best for those hands-on procedural skills? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.